In the second video, we're going to talk more about the importance of Mecca. Mecca was situated along the Red Sea, which connects the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, and eventually the Pacific Ocean to the east and to the Mediterranean Sea in the northwest. It also was a central location for overland trade across the Arabian Peninsula. So it's key for trade by water, key for trade by land. Mecca's prosperity and prominence were largely due to the constant fighting between the Roman and Persian Sassanid empires in the north, which made overland trade between the Persian Gulf and Mediterranean too perilous. This is where the ancient Silk Road was. Now it's very dangerous because of the warring empires are making this whole area too dangerous. The supremacy of the Roman Empire had begun to decline after the death of Marcus Aurelius, 180 AD, and it was split into a western and eastern portion, and later centered around its capital of Byzantium, present-day Istanbul, Turkey. By the 6th century, the western portion had fragmented into small, self-sufficient Germanic kingdoms, while Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, traded and fought with the Parthians and later the Sassanid Empire of Persia. The Sassanids came to power in Persia in 224 AD and aimed to restore the glory of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Sassanid rulers resurrected Persian traditions that had been supplanted by Greek and Roman customs when Alexander the Great conquered the territory in 330 BC. And they reinstated Zoroastrianism as the state religion. Within a few years, the Sassanid Empire had become strong enough to challenge the Roman Empire, and for the next 400 years, the two superpowers engaged in endless battles that eventually left both empires too weak to resist the advancing Muslim Arabs. In 570 AD, Muhammad was born in the Quraysh tribe, which at the time dominated Mecca as the prestigious keepers of the Kaaba. Remember that black square where all the idols are? When he was 25 years old, Muhammad married a 40-year-old widow named Khadijah and managed the caravan business she inherited from her late first husband. So he married into quite a wealthy family. Together, they had 6 children. Only one, his daughter Fatima, survived into adulthood. Fatima later married Muhammad's cousin Ali and had 2 sons, Hassan and Hussein. According to Islamic tradition, Muhammad began to receive revelations from God through the angel Gabriel when he was 40. That was in 610 AD. He continued to receive revelations for the rest of his life. Since Muhammad was illiterate, he memorized the passages and recounted them to his followers, who eventually compiled them into the Quran, Islam's sacred scripture, their holy book. Muslims believe that Muhammad was the last in a line of prophets from Adam to Abraham, to Moses to Jesus, and others. According to the tradition, God's revelations to Moses are compiled in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, and of the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. But the message was corrupted by the Jews, who paid too much attention to ritual observance. God then appeared to Jesus, whose book, the New Testament of the Christian Bible, was again corrupted through translations and political editing by Christians. The Christians, they contend, wrongfully cast Jesus as the Son of God and mistakenly created a separate religion altogether. The Quran, by contrast, affirmed God's oneness while incorporating many of these prior teachings as well. It was written in Arabic and remained pure as long as adherents read the book in its original language. Non-Arabic speaking Muslims are encouraged to recite the book in Arabic rather than rely on potentially flawed translation. The practice of Islam is built around the following of five fundamental requirements, or the five pillars. The first is affirmation of faith. All Muslims express that there is no God but God and Muhammad is the last messenger of God. The second pillar is prayer. Muslims pray toward Mecca 5 times a day. Shia Muslims combine some of the prayers and therefore pray only 3 times a day. The third pillar or requirement of Islam is charity. Muslims who have the means give charity to the poor on a yearly basis. The fourth requirement or pillar is fasting. Beginning at the first crescent moon in the month of Ramadan, when Muhammad received his first revelation from the angel Gabriel, Muslims must abstain from eating, drinking, smoking, or having sexual relations between sunup and sundown. The fifth pillar or requirement is a Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Once in a lifetime, Muslims make a trip to Mecca. According to tradition, this trip commemorates Abraham's example. Muslims who are physically or financially able to make the journey are those who are physically or financially unable to make the journey are released from this duty. Otherwise, you have to go. Let's speak about Jerusalem. According to Islamic tradition, in 619 AD, Muhammad took a night journey upon the back of a flying horse from Al-Masjid al-Haram, the nearest mosque, in Mecca, to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the furthest mosque, the sacred site in Jerusalem associated with the prophets in the former area of the temple sacred to the Jewish people. From the area where Solomon's temple once stood, Muhammad is believed to have been guided by the angel Gabriel through the 7 heavens, where he met Moses, Abraham, and other prophets. It's worth noting that Muslims consider Jerusalem a holy city, for the same reason as the Christians and the Jews, because it was the homeland of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and all of the great biblical prophets. The night journey is seen as proof of Muhammad's designation as the seal of the prophets. Medina. You see, it's just north of Mecca. Muhammad's influence in Mecca unsettled the local tribal chieftains, who were threatened by Muhammad's messages. The leaders of the Quraysh tribe, who were charged with tending to the many visitors who came to worship at the Kaaba, feared that Muhammad's message of monotheism, one God, would adversely affect the pilgrimage trade by weakening the status of the idols at the Kaaba. His message of equality also threatened the standing of tribal leaders, the merchant aristocracy, and city authorities. They didn't like being equal, they wanted to be better. As Muhammad's following grew, Meccan leaders increasingly persecuted the Muslims. The word Muslim means those who submit to God alone. In 622 AD, when conditions became too unbearable for Muslims living in Mecca, Muhammad decided to relocate to Yathrib, a city north of Mecca. The year the Muslims left Mecca became year 1 in the Islamic calendar. This journey away from Mecca is called the Hijrah. And it's year 1. And Yathrib was renamed Medinat al-Rasul, the city of the Prophet, or simply Medina. Since the Muslims were unable to conduct trade, they carried out raids on caravans traveling to and from Mecca in order to survive. Muslim victories during these battles helped build Muhammad's reputation and attracted converts from all over Arabia. Tribal chieftains around Medina embraced Islam and joined the growing Muslim confederation. Jewish tribes existed in Arabia long before the advent of Islam and participated in every level of Arab society. In fact, the town of Medina, where Muhammad and his followers had moved beginning in 622 AD, was dominated by three Jewish tribes who appreciated Muhammad's preaching against idolatry and his respect for Jewish prophets. The religions also shared many of the same beliefs and rituals. Both Jewish and Muslim men were circumcised. Both forbade the consumption of pork or foods not prepared according to religious guidelines. Permitted foods are considered kosher to the Jews and halal to Muslims. Another similarity between Judaism and Islam is that both Jews and Muslims fasted or don't eat at prescribed times of the year. For the first 15 years, the Muslims also prayed toward Jerusalem like their Jewish counterparts, until a falling out between Muhammad and the Jewish elders of Medina compelled the Muslims to realign the direction of prayer toward Mecca. Moreover, the fasting period for Muslims was set at 1 month, but only during daylight hours, while Jews fast 25 hours during Yom Kippur and have a number of other minor fast days throughout the year. While the Jewish day of rest begins at sunset on Friday and lasts for 25 hours, Muslims have a special congregational prayer on Friday afternoon. This communal prayer is accompanied by a sermon from their local religious leader. Jews usually hear a sermon on Saturday mornings. Islam's holy book, the Quran, also includes many of the same stories found in the Torah, Judaism's holy book, or the Old Testament for the Christians. Both books include similar accounts of the creation of Adam and Eve, Noah and the Great Flood, Moses' receipt of the Ten Commandments, and Abraham's sacrifice to God, as well as other events. By 628 AD, the Muslims had grown into a formidable force, giving Muhammad the leverage needed to broker a peace treaty with Mecca. After signing the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, Muhammad returned to Mecca in the holy month of Ramadan to perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage to the Kaaba, with 1,000 unarmed followers. 2 years later, the Meccans broke the peace by attacking a tribe that had been friendly with the Muslims. The breach prompted Muhammad to assemble an army of 10,000 men to march on Mecca a final time. Faced with such formidable force, the leaders of Mecca surrendered the city. Muhammad proclaimed an amnesty. Upon his victory, Muhammad performed the ritual 7 circuits around the Kaaba and smashed all 360 idols inside that had been placed around the sacred shrine. He then dedicated the Kaaba to God. He had purified the Kaaba and made it a holy place for Muslims. News of the victory over the Meccans spread rapidly, attracting delegates from all parts of Arabia. Tribes flocked to Medina to pledge their allegiance to Muhammad and their conversion to Islam. 4 years later, in 632 AD, Muhammad, fearing that death was near, delivered a farewell sermon to tens of thousands of his followers. In his speech, Muhammad encouraged his followers to treat others justly, regard the sacred months, and respect the rights of women. He also instructed Muslims to perform the daily prayers, fast during Ramadan, perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and pray and pay their debts and financial obligations. That's their charity. they're required to give to charity. Muhammad asserted that Arabs were not superior to non-Arabs and that no race was better than any other. He reminded his followers that he was Allah's last messenger and advised them to observe the Quran and convey his message to the people. Sometime later, Muhammad died without designating a successor. That's going to cause a lot of problems. We'll talk about that another time. You have some questions here to answer on Google Form.